The creepy kid in a weirdly empty bus station. This happened almost 10 years ago, when I was around 15 years old. I was in a sports team of our school, and there was a big tournament coming up, so we were practicing after every school day until late hours at night. One of my teammates, also a childhood friend of mine, was living in the same neighborhood as me, so we were returning home together every night after practices. One of those nights, around 10 p.m., later than usual, we got off the practice and reached our bus station as we always did. It was like a main station where many different bus stops were joined together. We waited almost an hour and our bus still wasn't showing up. We were already really frustrated, but there were other things that we started to realize just at that time. Firstly, there was initially nobody else than us was in sight in the station, and absolutely no bus was coming here, which was weird, because as I said, this was a main station. In fact, one of the biggest ones in the city. We started to think that we missed the last buses, or there should be a problem we didn't know about. We thought about calling a taxi. However, we were kind of poor and really stubborn with our money. Around that time, a little kid stumbled upon the station. I didn't really pay attention to him too much. In the city I live, street kids are pretty common. They come, ask for money, you ignore and they leave. However, this kid didn't pay attention to us either. He was looking for something in the ground. It was really dark, so he struggled to find it, as I struggled to see him. Later, my friend and I got into an argument about something. After about 15 minutes of me completely ignoring the kid, I heard a sound. Ching. Again. Ching. We both looked at him this time. He was clearly visible now. This kid, maybe a 10-year-old, was sitting under a streetlight, almost 10 meters away from us, facing away. He had a glass bottle in his hand, which was probably the thing he was searching for earlier, and was hitting that on the sidewalk that he was sitting on. Ching. He kept on hitting it over and over again. We thought, he's a kid, being a kid, no big deal, and tried to ignore him yet again, but I felt something was off. After 5 more minutes of chinging, the bottle loudly crashed. Now, we had no other option than to pay attention to him. After standing there with a half-broken glass in his hand for a couple seconds in complete silence, the kid turned around, started to look at us. It was the first time we saw his face. Even after 10 years, I still have occasional nightmares about this moment. The kid was actually not a kid, with a thick shade of beard on his expressionless face, an excessive bag under eyes. He looked like a junkie man in his late 30s. He got up and started walking at us with his beloved glass. At that moment, everything and nothing made sense at the same time. I had a fairly average height for my age, but this guy was lying below the level of my chest. He actually had the body of an 8-year-old. He was next to us in no time, with his thick and mumbly voice, as if he grew lips on his nostrils and had been learning to speak from them there, asked for money. We had to fucking run. As I said, we didn't have much money, but even if we did, this guy looked like he made his mind up. While I was thinking a way out, my idiot friend, who later told me that he felt so empowered because of the guy's height, made a move on him to grab the bottle. As a result, the bottle cut my friend's hand pretty deeply, which he didn't realize in the heat of the moment until the ground got covered in blood. After this, somehow shit got weirder. When the guy realized the blood was everywhere, he laid down on the ground and started to cry. Between his sobs, he mumbled something like this. He will come and kill me. My father looking will beat me now. His dad was looking? That moment, I don't know if we actually did see somebody walking towards us from the dark, or if it was a trick our minds played at us under the influence of adrenaline. But either way, that was it. Survival instinct was in control now with that. I don't know how long we have run. He was losing a lot of blood, so after getting our shit together, we found an open shop nearby. The guy gave us a shitload of napkins to wrap around his bleeding hand. Then we called my friend's family, and they took him to the hospital to get him stitched up. He got fine, and we never went to that creepy-ass no bus station again. The Flower Child. First, I'll give a little backstory. Trust me, it's relevant. I live in a tiny upper-middle-class neighborhood of double-story houses. My neighborhood used to be really well kept with regards to the streets and people's gardens.
When I say it's tiny, I mean minuscule. It only has one entrance and exit, so I'm basically aware of everyone that lives in my neighborhood. Anyways, notice that I said it used to be a nice neighborhood. Well, that's because a few months ago, 3 families, each with a bunch of kids, moved into a few of the vacant houses down the street, and coincidentally within a few days of each other. So naturally, the neighborhood declined. Loud, obnoxious kids, from toddlers to high schoolers, abruptly running across the street without watching for cars, numerous incidences of ding-dong ditch, chalk all over the streets and driveways. Since it's summertime, the kids are swarming across the streets from about 6 p.m. to almost 9 p.m., and it's super loud. I usually go for walks with my mom around the neighborhood at about 8 p.m., so I basically see these kids every day. Then late at night, it gets super quiet and no one, and I mean no one, walks around the neighborhood past midnight. Now, this is going to seem like a super random detail, but it's the reason I'm posting this story in the first place. About 2 weeks ago, my mom and I planned a bunch of different types of pretty flowers for the garden area near our front door. I was dorkily excited about them because it made our garden the brightest, most colorful one in the neighborhood. I guess maybe that is why it might have attracted him. Now, the only reason I noticed is because my parents are super cheap and won't turn on the air conditioner even in the sweltering heat. So I sleep with my window and curtains open, with a ceiling fan and another standing fan on. My room is on the second floor, right above the garage, and overlooks the driveway. I can also see the garden from my window. Of course, I was awake at about 1 a.m., unable to sleep due to the heat, and of course, because my window's open, the streetlight is beaming into my room. I just felt uneasy, so I got up to look out my window. This is the creepy part. I saw one of the neighboring kids, I think his name is Jordan, a high schooler, squatting down by my garden. I thought he was going to take a dump, boys are boys, right? But what I saw was even more disturbing. He was eating my flowers, not ripping them or even plucking the petals and then eating them. He was just bending his head down over the flower plant and just nibbling different flowers, like a cow grazing in a field. What the hell? I'm a tiny 18-year-old, not confrontational at all, so I didn't call out on or even tell anyone about this incident. I very quietly crept back into my bed, hoping he didn't notice my shadow outline in the window. And to make this even creepier, a few days later, his mom did the exact same thing at around the same time. My stomach just dropped. I seriously don't know what to do about this. I haven't told my mom and I don't think I will. She still thinks that a cat or insects are eating our flowers, you know? While typing this out, all I could think was, what the fuck? Update 1. I'll keep you guys posted on what unfolds. I wasn't expecting this many reads and views as a first Redditor. Thanks for the advice, guys. I haven't told my mom yet, but I plan on telling her tomorrow. Update 2. Sorry for keeping you waiting. I've been trying to keep watch for a few nights, but there's been no activity. I suspect that they have either moved onto a different garden in the neighborhood or changed their times if they're still continuing with this activity. Also, it's probably unrelated, but there are 2 police cars down the street from my house right now. Some officers are talking to a different one of my neighbors. So I told my mom and she doesn't believe me. She says that only little children would do such a thing. I don't see my dad much, since he's at work most of the time, but I called him and asked him if I should call the police if I see them eating the flowers again. I think he believed me, but he told me not to because he's afraid that they, the creepers, will do something to our cars. Typical Asian. But now that I look back on the situation, I do find it hilarious even if it is creepy. Pedophile in the making. I was in first grade when I met Russell T. He was a fellow classmate. I remember he had blonde hair that was basically a rat tail growing into a mullet, and always wore neon shorts, cut off muscle tees, early 90s, and this puck-ass smirk. He seemed older than all the other kids, I guess, because he was allowed to do so many things that we weren't, to be honest, like ride his bike to and from school without an adult, and I'm pretty sure he has been held back a year. I was always a little jealous of the former. I couldn't even ride a bike without training wheels. All my life, I've been teased about being shorter than everyone else my age.
My sister told me I looked like a toddler of like 3 to 4 from the ages of 5 to 8. Small size t-shirts for kids my age would come down to my knees. I was used to being called the usual names: shorty, small fry, lil bit, typical shit kids an adult taunt with. Tall privilege is a real thing. Anyways, having made lots of friends and with kindergarten fresh under my belt, I figured first grade would just be more of the same, but nothing prepared me for the kind of bullying Russell T had in store for me. At first, it was just irritating stuff. I had long dark hair, and my mother bought me headbands of all different colors to coordinate with my outfits. On the playground, Russell would run up to me, grab the headband off my head, and I'd spend the rest of recess chasing him and yelling for him to give it back. Usually a teacher would intervene and tell him to return it. One time, she turned away as he was walking up to me to give it back to me, and he told me under his breath to open my mouth when I didn't. He jammed the headband between my teeth and patted my head, roughly saying "good girl," then ran off, turning his head back to look at me and smile with his eyes narrowed into slits. Other times he would chase me, and if he caught me, he tried to kiss me, but that was pretty normalized behavior on the playground, so I just ran over to the teacher until he gave up waiting me out. Once he just walked up to me, picked me from under my armpits, and carried me over to the monkey bars. I never played on them because I was too short to reach them from the ladder rungs, and they were spaced too far apart for me to cross. He lifted me up and told me he'd let me go if I could just reach up and grab onto them, so I did, and he did let me go, much to my relief, but all I could do was hang there as he reached up and slid his hands up inside one of my short legs and touched the edges of my underwear. I gasped and looked straight down to find him smiling up at me in a way I'd never seen another child smile. The second time he tried to do that, I grabbed onto the monkey bars, kicked him in the face, and used them to break my fall when I let go. The teacher saw this and I got into trouble. I tried to explain what he was doing, but I was embarrassed, inarticulate, and stuttering. I hadn't even learned a lot of words I needed to say in order for her to understand exactly what was going on and why it was not okay. She cut me off and just shook her head, smiling weirdly, saying, "He picks on you because he likes you." I remember feeling completely shocked by her words. I didn't care how he felt. What the hell did it matter? I just wanted him to leave me alone. She was no help as I sat inside the chalk-squared section off for kids who were in out time. Russell ran past me laughing and pointing. Then he did the Michael Jackson crotch grab and ran off. I was disgusted. I started to dread recess, so I purposefully got answers on my worksheets wrong, so I would have to sit inside and redo it with the teacher's helper, while she graded other stuff or made decorations for the classroom. It was peaceful, but soon it made things worse. We had classroom activity for learning letters, where we would line up in a circle and draw the letter we were learning on the back of the person in front of us with our fingers. Girls would usually try to be behind the other girls, and boys would try to be behind other boys. But even if it didn't end up that way, nothing ever happened besides little kids drawing on each other's backs. Don't ask me why Mrs. Olson decided it was an effective learning technique. I have no fucking clue. All I know is that all the hairs on my neck stood straight up as I realized Russell had just run across the room so he could stand behind me. The letter that day was T. The teacher had us draw the horizontal line first, then the long vertical line. I could feel his eyes looking down on me, and I wanted nothing more than to run back to my seat. He drew the first line with his finger across my shoulder blades, and I remember the second he touched me with his vile hand, my whole body felt like shriveling up. Then came the vertical line. I drew mine on the girl in front of me and stopped when I got to her waist. Russell went past my waist, past my lower back, and down, 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 until he was touching between my legs. I felt sick. We were not taught in school about bad touches yet, but I knew this was a bad touch. If it had been an adult who touched me, I probably would have felt way more certain and way more capable of telling, but this was another child, and somehow it bewildered me to the point of silence. I can't even explain how frozen I felt, how confused. The teacher had us draw the letter T 3 more times before she let us sit back down. As I walked back to my seat, I felt hollow and couldn't concentrate the rest of the day. Why did I feel like something had been taken away from me? Why did I feel so ashamed? I know you'll want to know why I didn't tell my parents, but I'll keep the explanation short. I grew up with parents who taught me my body did not belong to me and did not believe me when I told them about stuff like this. Later in the school year, my mother volunteered to chaperone a field trip to the school, in Russell, a friend of his plus a friend of mine, were all put in my mom's group with me. My mom is loud, but her English is hard to understand, so a lot of kids were scared or tried to avoid her attention. Not Russell T. He openly told her to shut up, told her she was ugly and talked stupid, flipped her off, and deserted the group with his friends more than once. I remember the dismay as she shook her head, saying, "He don't treat me like a grown-up." I had to agree. When we were back on the bus, he repeatedly kicked the back of our seat and tried to snatch our sunglasses off my mom's head. She really wanted to slap him, and almost did until my teacher had him sit up front with her. Then he behaved. As the bus approached the school, and the teacher was distracted talking to the driver, he looked behind at me and drew his finger over his throat and smiled. I don't think my mom saw, or else she would have done something. My mom lingered outside the classroom while I got my things. Usually she drove or rode her bike, but this time she walked. We lived about 2 or 3 residential streets up from the school, so she took my bag from me and we began walking home. Guess who also walked home with his older brother? Yep. He called my name and then yelled, "Hey, stupid." I was shocked because I realized he was addressing my mother. He threw an empty Coke can at her, then a rock, while she yelled at him and his brother laughed. She had an umbrella in her hand, and at one point, I thought she was going to beat him over the head with it, but as soon as she took a step towards him, he and his brother ran off down what I assumed was their street, and we were left in peace for the rest of our walk home. Next week I was back in class. The teacher said, "Okay, everyone, line up." I went over to a girl named Amanda and asked her if she would be behind me. She smiled, said sure, and this wave of relief washed over me. It was short-lived, however, because Russell pushed her out of the line, roughly, and although she was very vocal and pushed him back, he would not let her back in behind me, and the teacher called out her impatiently, telling her to get in line, so she had no choice but to get behind him. The letter that day was B. The teacher had us draw the vertical line down, and Russell just kept going down and down my back, but this time he lingered. The teacher wasn't watching. He lowered his head over down to my shoulder and whispered behind me, "You like that? You like it when I touch you there." I didn't like it. I hated it. I hated him. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to be punished, and at the same time I felt so ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening to me, that I was someone things like this could happen to, and the teacher just kept on instructing us, turning around to smile occasionally, telling us we were doing a good job. Really, I see now that I couldn't believe what was happening, that it was being allowed without my permission. He didn't care if he had that or not, and he was getting away with it. He loved that he was getting away with it. He put both his hands on my shoulders and traced down the sides of my body down to my waist. Then he started drawing the letter again. I heard him snicker under his breath and whisper, "I like how little you are." If anyone else had said that to me, it would have probably felt nice. It was something I was usually teased about, something people brought to my attention in order to make me feel acknowledged I was different from them and everyone else. But when he said it, I just felt disgusting and I didn't understand why. I wish I had something done. I screamed, kicked him in the nuts. He just seemed so unfazed and untouchable. I was furious. I'm still furious. Sometimes we would have library time with another class, and I remember one day we had to go watch a video about insects or sea animals, and there were not enough chairs, so a few kids had to sit on the floor. I got to sit in a front row chair because I was so short, and the librarian wanted to make sure I could see. I was wearing a dress with white stockings that day. The librarian turned out the lights, and all of a sudden someone was sitting in front of my chair. When she pressed play, the video illuminated the dark room, and I was able to see the person in front of me was Russell. He kept scooting back, and I tried to kick him in the head until he reached back to hook his arm around my legs tightly. He stroked his head up and down my stockinged legs and tried to get his hand between them. My feet didn't even touch the floor. If they had, I would have stomped down on his other hand. I raised my hand to go to the bathroom, and when I returned, I sat on the floor in the back. Russell turned around and saw me and told the librarian I was out of my seat. She shushed him and walked me back to my seat but didn't leave. She stayed next to us the whole time and he didn't try anything else. I was so relieved when the school year ended because I thought that summer would be Russell-free, and it was. Until one weekend, my parents decided to have a garage sale. My dad put up signs at the end of our street, and my mother set up tables with different things on them that had bright round stickers marked with prices. She let me have a few blank stickers to draw faces on, and I remember my dad was selling his motorcycle as well. I played out in the front yard, and people parked their cars on the side of the street, walking up to our driveway, waving at me and saying hello. I heard a loud muffler and looked up and saw a beat-up truck approach slowly. It idled as it came up to our house, same as the other cars, but for some reason, I turned around and looked up at it. My heart almost stopped and my stomach dropped. There he was, inside the truck with a dog, a young man with long hair. and an older man who was dressed like a biker. The dog barked viciously down at me, and Russell leered from behind the driver's seat. In my head, I was freaking out because now he knew where I lived. I assumed the man was Russell's father, and the young man was his oldest brother. They all had that hungry, predatory look in their eyes. "Hello, darling," the older man drawled. "Your dad selling the bike?" I nodded. He looked me over with his dog, going apeshit. "What about you?" he asked. I was confused and just stared up at him. He pointed a sticker I had stuck on my shirt. "How much are they selling for you?" Rusty brought his piggy bank. He laughed as he said this. But fortunately, there was no parking on either side of the street, and our driveway was full. There were a few cars behind them, so they had to keep going. As soon as they were past my house, I ran inside, up the stairs, and pulled the shade down on my window. I was terrified that he would come back to find me, so I just hid in my room until most of the people left, and my dad yelled for me to come pick up my toys because people kept thinking that they were for sale. I didn't see Russell again that summer, but I did see his oldest brother. He drove by our house as I was playing in the driveway alone and called out to me asking me if I wanted any candy, laughing as he peeled away. What a fucking cliche. When second grade started up, I was relieved that Russell wasn't in my class, but all the second graders shared the same lunch and recess time. I just tried to avoid Russell at all costs, hanging out with a larger group of girls. We went to watch a video at the library with another class again, and to my horror, it was Russell's class we were paired with. I sat on the floor this time, and a girl named Annaliz sat behind me because she wanted to braid my hair. Russell sat next to me. As the lights went out, tried to put his hand under my crisscrossed legs. Annaliz saw him and loudly said, "Ew, Russell, what are you doing?" Russell's a butt toucher. His face turned red and he scooted away. Kids chanted her taunt back at him in a sing-song on the way back to her classroom, and I was surprised none of the negative attention was directed at me, and I was so happy that he was finally being humiliated. He really didn't try to do anything else to me after that because, besides call me names, my days were pretty easy going for the rest of the school year. He wasn't in my third grade class either, and around this time, it was a pretty popular pastime to divulge secret crushes or gossip about who you suspected you had a crush on, especially if you single out that person and tease them all the time. One girl called out loudly to Russell, who was sitting at another table, that he likes me, and his friend who was sitting beside him joined in on the teasing. "Yeah, you like her, you told me," while everyone laughed and jeered. I cringed as my eyes floated over to where he was sitting. I dreaded seeing his gloating little face, been successful most of the year at avoiding it. But as I looked at him, I realized something was different. His face was completely impassive, and as the rushes died down, because he wasn't giving the teasers the reaction they wanted, I heard him say clearly, "I don't like her anymore, she's too old." I just turned 9. The creep from PE class. I mostly forgot about this until I started reading the subreddit and figured I'd share. This all started about 4 years ago when I was a junior in high school and continued until 2 months into my senior year. My PE class announced our next unit was going to be volleyball. Now I'm a semi-competent volleyball player. I didn't play for the school team or anything, but I can get the ball across the net and not let it hit the ground on our side. Apparently this amount of skill was enough to impress one of the boys who was in said class. For the rest of the semester, he followed me around class. We were running a lap around the field. He was running alongside me, asking me questions like, "You're pretty tan. What's your tan line like? Or what ethnicity are you? You're pretty white, but it seems like there may be something else." He was right. My great-grandpa wasn't white, but yikes, dude. We were getting into groups. I made sure my group had enough people in it, or he was going to be in it for sure. I knew it was creepy, but I was a very naive child who kind of brushed it off with a short laugh and started running faster or whatever to get away because I had no idea how to handle it. I started asking my friends about this guy, and it turns out that he was now with a lot of girls. Okay then, I thought to myself, I guess I'll just continue to give him short answers to stuff and hope it stops. Going back to that whole naive thing, after about a week I figured he's not harming anyone, so I talked to him more than I should have. At this point he was coming up to me and my friend group after PE and talking with just me. After the first semester of this stops, boy, I was grateful. I just didn't know how to deal with him at all. Turns out it only stopped because he was starting dating our head drum major. I thought it was an interesting relationship to say the least, because of how he treated me, but hey, he wasn't bothering me anymore, and they seemed happy enough, right? Towards the end of the year, we had our school blacklight rally, which was one of the highlights of the year. Afterwards, I'm helping wheel the marambas back to the band room, and who comes up? The same guy. So it's me, my best friend, and a big-ass marimba trekking across the expanse of asphalt behind the gym to get back to the band room. Enter PE guy, who, for whatever reason, was riding a skateboard alongside us, pushing this marimba. He said hi, asked if we need any help, and despite us not saying anything, proceeded to try to put his hands over mine on the marimba stand. I immediately moved my hand and he tried again. When I moved my hand a second time, he got the message. Kinda tried to help for another little bit, then took off on his skateboard. I thought it was extremely weird at the time, but apparently him and the head drum major had broken up by this point, or very shortly broke up afterwards. I forget exactly. So he was free and could pursue other girls. Luckily for me, that did include girls other than me. After that incident, I don't think I saw this guy for the rest of the year. I thought I was free of him, and he was just one more creepy guy I could add to my list of stories to tell. But that was not the case. Shortly before senior year, I found out that my family was moving 2 months into the school year. Yay, I told my friends. We determined to have a good time, as we can, with all the time I have left. It got down to my last day of school before moving. I decided to skip my art class to go hang out with my friends, who had second lunch and I didn't normally see during the day, so I could be with them one last time. Well, who showed up? The guy from my PE class. He came up to me and said, "I hear you're moving." I didn't really know how to respond to that other than, "Yeah, I am. It's my last day here." Wrong move. Instead of saying I'll miss you or a normal goodbye, have a great time and good luck, that I wish he left me with, he decided to come up from behind me and hug me. I was so startled I didn't really know what to do. One of my good friends came out to a lunch group about that time and gave me a weird look, which I returned because I didn't know what to do. Said creepy guy hugged me for what felt like forever and then, before leaving, gave me a kiss on the cheek. I was frozen for a moment after he left. All I could think was, did that really just happen? It did. My friends confirmed it for me. And we all agreed that he was extremely fucking creepy. A month or two later, I had moved. He sent me a friend request on Facebook. I denied it. Though I don't think I ever blocked him now that I think about it. So, creepy boy, let's not meet ever again. Please,